Hey everybody, welcome to EverydayFI, where we explore the everyday lives of people in the FI community and discuss the everyday ways to reach financial independence. Today is another bonus episode, and if you'd like to hear the entire thing and not just the first 10 or 15 minutes, make sure to check out my premium membership, EverydayFI Plus, at patreon.com/EverydayFI podcast. You get bonus episodes every month and ad-free content for the main feed, so it's a really cool deal. Today, I am back with David Robinson, and we're going to talk about the perfect asset allocation. Hey, David, how you doing?
I'm doing really good, Megan. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's very early for me. We were just talking about this before we hit record that we woke up pretty early to record this because David has a flight to catch. It's like 6 a.m. your time, and nobody's gonna cry for me. It's 8 a.m. my time, but 8 a.m. for me is early. So you're gonna get some early voices and potentially some grumpiness. Hopefully
Yep,
not.
yep. I won't be my normal super chipper self, but I'll try. Once I get talking, I'll get excited and everything. But yeah, Megan was kind enough to do this really early with me. I'm actually going down to Mexico to get a root canal, so I'll have to report back on dental tourism and let you know how that goes. It's crazy. It's like cheaper to do it cash and pay for a flight and hotel down there than it is to do it up here with insurance, which is kind of mind blowing. But anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
for
So
sure.
I'm hopping on a flight in a few hours.
That's crazy. Yeah, you'll have to. Is this the first time you're doing medical tourism, or have you done it before?
It is, yeah. Yes. So I will say when I was in Australia, I went to a physio, which is a physical therapist, but that was because of something that like happened, while I was down there. And I was like, again, paying cash. It was like the equivalent of $100, and the guy was amazing and spent an hour with me. And I'm just so impressed with the limited amount of medical care that I've received in other countries. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. It seems like people are pretty happy with dental work down in Mexico.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Well, wish you luck. And yeah, let's jump in. Okay, so perfect asset allocation. What do you think about that? What
Yeah,
kind of asset allocations do you like? Yeah, what are
yeah.
your
This is
different portfolio concepts? I would like to talk about a little bit about what we do too, if that's possible, as like maybe a an example, but we can get to that later.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of my favorite things to talk about because it comes up in almost every client, call that I have. And also I see it just sort of negatively affecting a lot of investors out there, not just people in the fire community, but people who are investing in general. There's this idea that like I have to learn as much as I can so that I can like invest in the most perfect things that are going to, limit my volatility, but also give me the massive growth that I need to hit retirement or save up for whatever I'm trying to save up for. And the problem is that thing doesn't really exist. We only know what returns have done in the past for different types of stocks, like U.S. large cap stocks, small cap value, international REITs, all these different things. We only know what happened in the past. The other thing is that I see people often just looking at past returns and saying like, oh man, XYZ type of stock has outperformed all the other ones, so I'm just going to invest in that. Well, that happened in the past. That doesn't mean that it won't happen again in the future, but that's all in the past. And, it's actually a human bias. It's that past performance indicates future results. And that's so wrong that, every single financial planner out there includes that as, sort of a disclaimer that past performance does not indicate future results. So anyway, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but I wanted to do this topic because it affects a lot of people and I just see people doing a lot of the wrong things. So I wanted to talk about quote unquote what is the perfect asset allocation, which as Megan alluded to, there is no perfect asset allocation. There's just things that you should consider, when you're designing your own portfolio and then implementing that portfolio.
Yeah, for sure. And how do you contend with people or like help people figure out how to get through, you know, the idea of, I guess, FOMO or, hey, I didn't do this portfolio that I heard about and I should have because look how it outperformed the one that I did choose. It's kind of that hindsight's 2020. Everybody looks back and says, "Oh, I should have made better decisions." How do you talk them through something like that? Like to me, I would assume like, well, how much better did it really perform from what you have? Unless you only had cash or only had bonds, like a generally similar portfolio, even if it's just like VT Saxon Chill versus like Paul Merriman's, portfolio, I have a feeling they probably perform relatively the same, maybe like a 1 to 2% difference, but that's an assumption on my part. I don't know if that's true. So yeah, how do you approach that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I kind of call this like shiny object syndrome. It's this thing that you didn't know about before, and it's had this recent exceptional performance. And now it's like, oh man, I got to get in on this because look at everything that I missed out on. There's tons and tons of examples of this. The big one in the recent past is like cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency has like gained a lot of value. And, of course, what happens is that people, it's gained a lot of value, and then people start to jump in. And then, of course, what happens is the price goes down, and then people freak out. They're like, oh, that was a mistake. And they jump out. And this is not just with crypto, but with pretty much everything. This is how people invest. And it's human nature. Humans are, we have this like really big brain, but we also have this part of our brain that reacts instinctively to things. And this comes back to hundreds of thousands of years ago when you needed to be able to react immediately when you saw a lion. You didn't have time to say, oh, that's an animal. Oh, I think it's a lion. Are lions dangerous? No, you just had to instantly react. And unfortunately, that sort of emotional part of our brain, which reacts very, very quickly without thinking, is the same thing that causes us to sabotage our own investment performance. So when so the way that you kind of combat that is by number one, I I'm kind of biased because I'm a financial planner, but talking with financial planners about this type of thing, like having a conversation like, hey, I feel like I'm missing out on this thing, or hey, my holdings that I have done really poorly lately, and I'm thinking about jumping ship. Having those conversations with somebody else and essentially having them be able to kind of walk you back from the ledge is really, really helpful. And this is why like people that work with financial planners, even the ones that charge like a 1% AV, which is quite high, they tend to have bigger portfolios at the end of their life than, people who are DIY investors. And I know that I'm sounding biased because I'm a financial planner and I'm like, please come and give me your money. But I mean, it really is true. The other thing that people can do, again, this is all about like combating our own biases and our own instincts that tend to sabotage us, right? We're just trying to combat our own bad behavior. The other thing that we can do is basically implement some rules for ourselves on how we're going to invest. And one of the ways that you can do that is by creating something called an investor policy statement or an IPS. And this is something that financial planners, create for their clients, but it's also something that you can just create on your own. Basically print out this document that you design yourself and sign it. And it's going to include a lot of different things: how you're going to handle cash flow, how much you're going to invest, but also it's going to include what is your asset allocation and when will you do things like rebalance between different assets. And something else I like to put in there is if you do make changes to your asset allocation, specifically with what types of funds are being included or not included, when is that going to be implemented? And what I like to put into those is like at least a 6 month timer that says, for example, if you get super interested in, cryptocurrency or something like that, it's like, okay, if you decide, hey, I want to introduce this new thing into my portfolio, let's, put a statement in your IPS that says there's going to be a 6 month delay on that. And that's going to prevent you from making a lot of impulsive emotional decisions. And I don't say that as like an insult, but it's just how our brains work. So here's a really good example of that. In March of 2020, when COVID was not just becoming a thing, but it was becoming clear that the government was going to have to put down a lot of restrictions on people's movement and going into businesses, like the stock market crashed very, very, very suddenly. I mean, it was like, well, I don't know. I was out to see when this happened, so I didn't see it happening live, but I saw it afterwards, and it was a very, very quick decline. And of course, what happened is that people freaked out. They saw their money start to go down and they said, I don't want to handle any further losses, so I'm going to move to cash. Okay. And of course, we all know that in 2020, that very quick downturn ended about 3 weeks later. And by, I think it was 5 or 6 months later, the stock market was higher than the previous highs during the year. So people maybe don't realize that 2020 was actually an up year for the stock market. So this is where that 6 month trigger would have really helped them, right? Because, let's say that it's March of 2020 and you're biting your fingernails like, oh my God, the world's about to end. And I've got all these stock holdings that just lost, 25%. If those people implemented that 6 month trigger, it would have been September by the time they said, okay, it's been 6 months. I decided that I did not want to be, invested, you know, 80% stocks, 20% bonds. I wanted something more conservative because I was freaking out. But now the stock market has kind of recovered. My emotions have time to calm down. And I kind of realized, oh, that was actually just like all stock market downturns. This is a temporary thing that recovered. And now I'm able to think a little bit more clearly. And I actually don't need to do this like drastic, reduction in my stock portfolio that I thought I needed back in March. So again, this is all just kind of like tricking us, tricking us into doing the right things. It's kind of the same as like if you want to work out every day, you don't just say I'm going to work out every day. You schedule time at the gym, you lay your gym clothes out in the morning. These are all just things to trick us into doing our better behavior and combating our, sort of instinctive behavior that says, I don't want to wake up early and go to the gym. It's the same with your stock portfolio.
Yeah, so I have a funny story for that March 2020. I was sort of like hanging out with a guy at the time. This was before I met my husband, obviously. And he was such a jerk. Like I should have no I should the writing was on the wall, but this was like the thing that broke the camel's back. I'm not gonna do like the right phrases this morning, by the way, y'all. It's gonna be the thing that broke the camel's back. So he was basically telling me it was around March and the stock market had gone way down. And he was like, I think he said, I'm not gonna buy the stock market anymore because it's gonna keep going down. I'm gonna wait till it goes to the very bottom. And I was like, you don't know when it's gonna go to the bottom. Nobody knows that. And he was like, well, I have a friend who's a millionaire who like has his own businesses and he says it's going to go down and I think he knows more than you do about money obviously. And I was like, "Okay." It's like, "We're done. I'm done." And then like literally like I think it was a week later, that's when the stock market started going back up again. And never quit. Like it never went back down again. It just like you can see it's almost like a V. It's so fast how fast it went back up. And so I love that story because I feel so validated and vindicated because I was like, man, it's too bad I stopped talking to him because I could have been like, told ya. So anyway, yeah, the stock market is I always call it a wild beast. Like you have no idea what it's gonna do. I mean, even my husband and I get into little, discussions about this that where we disagree. He's like, "Oh my God, like international politics are going insane. And so the stock market, it might not be a good thing to like keep buying." I was like, honey, the stock market doesn't necessarily follow the trends of what's happening in politics, like not the way that you would think. And so you can't predict it. And so it's better to just keep, buying in and at a regular pace and hold it and wait. And that's what, I'm glad I'm the one who's like kind of making sure that we make those decisions because yeah, it's very emotional. And I also think people need to give themselves a little bit of grace. If you did have an emotional knee-jerk reaction in the past to something, it's okay. Move on. It's fine. We all have done it. And the people who haven't done it, good for you. You're outliers. Most people have. And yeah, so what are some good portfolios that people could maybe aim for or what's the next topic that you want to do?
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that, and I'll give some kind of guidelines on like, designing your perfect portfolio. And by the way, we should put in like the disclaimer that we usually put in, which is like, this is not investment advice for you. You should consult a real professional to look at
Yeah.
your specific situation and help you design this. Because I really don't want people to listen and sort of miss the whole message and say, well, David is investing in XYZ, so I'm going to invest in
Hmm.
XYZ. Because number one, you're not going to
Yes.
stick to it, and then you're going to go and sue me when like it doesn't meet your goals. So please
Please
don't sue
don't
me.
sue us. This is entertainment purposes only. Individual needs differ, and you need to talk to your own experts. We are just sitting here talking about hypothetical ways you could have a portfolio if you wanted, but do not follow what we're saying unless you speak to a professional on your own. Or David. You can hire David and he can do it individually, but like
Yeah.
don't base it off of this episode. I think that's
Yeah.
probably good enough. That's good
I
enough
think so too.
disclaimer.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of goes back to the idea of the quote unquote perfect asset allocation. It's like, if you bring me five different people, I'm going to give you five different ways of, managing their money. Cause I have to ask a lot of questions to figure out, what their risk tolerance is and risk capacity. And also, you know, figure out like what their needs are, like for example, a person with a ton of, like social security and a pension and stuff like that, their asset allocation might be a little bit different than a person who's completely relying on their portfolio. So again, every person is different. You really do need to have like a very long conversation about what your needs are and how you're going to respond or how you think you're going to respond to really volatile markets and everything.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a quick rating. Also, hit up my Patreon at patreon.com/everydayfi podcast for ad-free and bonus content. I'm Megan Combs, and I'll see you next time on Everyday Fi.